for us are two sets of GP7s done up in a beautiful orange and black paint screen for Texas and Pacific. These engines are of different road numbers. Here's a 374 and a 375. Here's a 377 and a 378. These sets happen to power the Sunshine Special that Flyer released first in 1955, then again in 1956, and then again in 1958. However, the sets that were released in 1958 had a 5-digit engine at the front, or engine set at the front, which are not represented here. There are some differences in the two sets in front of us, and the same was true with the sets. The first set that came out, the engine was single power unit or single motor, so 4 wheels powered, and diesel horn in the powered unit and headlight, of course. The non-powered unit had headlight. And if we then fast forward 1 year to this set, again we have a single powered unit with headlight, and then we have a non-powered unit with headlight, but now they added a diesel roar, which you can not really see much other than the bolt there in the middle. So that was the primary difference between the two sets. However, there are a few differences too in the cars that were included with that set as well. And I'm not going to really delve into the 5-digit set as time does not allow for that. But let's go ahead and get into this a bit more. So this is the unpowered unit, A unit, I guess you'd say, for our GP7 set, the number 377. And you can see here it's pretty simple, amazingly clean. There's not rust, there's not accumulation of years of grime and grit. I also noticed that the speaker here is quite a bit smaller than some of the other ones. Here's an unfortunately busted up speaker out of a Hudson that I recently replaced, but you can see this one is quite a bit smaller. And also I'm wondering if this capacitor and resistor both were replaced. They're not the ones I typically see on these diesel roar. The other thing I'm not seeing is any sort of on-off switch, so that is something that I'm going to install myself, and we'll do a simple toggle switch underneath this mechanism and apparatus here. And so but first of all, let's go ahead and see if this thing runs, and then I'll bring it back after I get a switch installed. Looks like it runs like a champ. So here is the metal shavings from making my hole. The challenge is there's just not much room because the inside of this shell is really narrow. So as I experimented with different options, I ran into a couple things I didn't expect. Number one, this reed was hitting the metal plate on the other side of the switch, and power was jumping from there to up here at the contacts, which was rendering basically bypassing the reed, so the diesel roar was not working. So that was one issue. So fortunately, all I had to do was lower the switch, which it has a pretty long collar on it, so that was not a big deal. The second thing I noticed is the solution was to slightly offset the diesel roar. So instead of it being parallel straight down the center, I just wanted to put it off at a slight angle, and then I had the little bit of space I need for the on-off switch. But when I would move it off of center, it would quit working. Lo and behold, the culprit is, and I've taken the restraining nut and gasket eyelet off, is this wire here has 1, 2 breaks in the insulation, and so those were shorting everything out. So my next step is to go ahead and I'll do this off camera, but unsolder this wire and replace it with something new without breaks. Well, I'm back, and after some more experimentation, because they're grounding the speaker and the wire or the headlights to the frame, I would need to isolate the light bulbs completely from their ground to run them separately off of the trucks and not have my on-off switch also kill the headlights. And it could certainly be done. I don't have the materials that I need to do that. That also gets into being a bit more invasive than I'm comfortable doing at the moment. So I guess for now, you'll have diesel roar with lights, or no diesel roar and no lights. All right, let's move on to the powered unit. Well, here we are back with our powered GP7 Texas and Pacific number 378, and a couple things that I see that are both good and a bit frustrating. Number one, someone has put on new fingers, both top and bottom, and they look brand new. The drum has been polished. I can get the reverse unit to turn. I was seeing a little bit of arcing though, so the fingers need to be adjusted, which I've done that. This is the thing that I mentioned frustrated. Why, oh why, oh why would you not use either shrink wrap, liquid electrical tape, or wire nuts? When I open this up, these are completely exposed. So, you know, that explains why this engine didn't want to run for me earlier. I'm sure these wires were shorting out with each other. So, I guess moral of the story is you never know what you're going to get, right? So, one thing I want to do then is probably I will add shrink tubing, because that'll be a quick simple way someone could actually pull that off if they wanted to down the road. So I will be doing that here in a little bit. The motor, runs both directions. It sounds like it's got a little resistance going the one direction. Someone did do some lubrication, and it doesn't look like it's excessive, so that's good. But I do want to go ahead and take everything apart and clean it real good. Inspect above the gears and see what kind of stuff we're dealing with there. Brushes look to be pretty good, but first things first, shrink wrap these tips, and then we'll go for there. Oh, also something that those of you that do little wire repairs like you see here may find interesting. I found this on our friends the Jungle site, is this, and it was pretty cheap. Now I'm gonna pause the camera because if I open this with one hand, which I've done before, it creates a huge mess, and you'll see why in a second. So check this out. We've got short sections of shrink wrap tubing of all kinds of dimensions, some of which I will probably never use. I don't know where I would use something that's that kind of wire gauge, but certainly the smaller stuff I'll use, and I've already used some of it. And what I appreciate is each one of these lengths, like in the case of this particular engine, probably take this blue here, and I'll probably be able to get 4 shrink wrap pieces out of one section. In other words, this tray is going to last me for years. So something to consider if you find yourself needing shrink wrap tubing, which I always do. And I don't know if this is the absolute cheapest way to get shrink wrap tubing, but I appreciated the colors, I appreciated the different dimensions, because that's always a challenge if you have wires that are too big and your shrink wrap tubing is not big enough trying to get it on there, or if you're the other case where your wire is smaller gauge and your tubing is too big, that can be the same kind of problem. So this is a great option, and again, from the Jungle site, I make no money off of this. This is a PSA. But fortunately, this one was a pretty straightforward clean and lube, with the exception, as I mentioned, putting on some coverings over the spliced wires. One thing that's really interesting about this particular engine is the gear noise that it makes. And I did my combination of oils that I've been using frequently that generally does a great job of quieting things down. But this just didn't quiet down much. There's just quite a bit of gear noise at the low speeds. I guess it is what it is. The motor itself runs pretty freely. I'm able to get it to go, at low speeds. This is the transformer's at 30 miles per hour. We get slow speed, and of course we got high end too. So it seems to be running well both directions through the ranges. So, minus the second diesel unit with the diesel roar and the noisy caboose with the solenoid in it, this is the sound this engine makes. For those of you that recall, this reminds me very much of the Rocket. All that to say, I'm afraid this guy is in need of a rebush because it shouldn't be running with that kind of noise, and it's not running very well. It should be running much freer than it is. So I think unfortunately this is going to need a lot of work to get it running the way it should. So this was not super evident on the bench, but on the rails it is.